Welcome, humans, to Unconditionally Human. This is our first podcast. I'm happy to present Dan in Northcote. Dan, would you like to tell us a bit about yourself and what you do and why we're going to have a chat tonight?
Yeah, sure. G'day, I'm Dan. Thanks for inviting me to the first podcast. I guess a little bit about me. I'm what's called an enterprise coach or a leadership coach. I work with leaders and leadership teams and also just generally teams in some of Australia's, biggest companies. I've been doing this for a pretty long time, for about 15 years. And basically I help these companies become a little more human in what they do and put the human element at the center of the way they're working. So I help leaders be more present with their teams. I help teams be more present with each other. And I use this to help teams become what's called a high-performing team, or a leadership team become a high-performing leadership team, so they can do their jobs better by being more human. So yeah, and I guess you've got me here today to talk about human stuff. So yeah, so I think we're talking about emotions and stuff today. So it's a lot of what I do every day.
Awesome. So obviously work with a lot of psychology. I have even said you're like the Australian Simon Sinek. I've dubbed that to you because I think you can see you can conceptualize, and then you can obviously implement and cause change. You're a leader in the change space, which is so awesome, and that's what you've been doing 15 years. That's a long time.
Yeah, that's true. So I do a lot of like organizational change and deal a lot with organizational psychology. Yeah, it's an interesting analogy to Simon Sinek. Basically, it's funny. I was talking about that today. It's like, oh yeah, so basically I just do what Simon Sinek does. But he does all the presentation. But yeah, I work on the ground and help executives implement those types of changes. Yeah.
Awesome. So today I thought I'll actually talk a bit about myself quickly. I haven't talked too much on the channel, but I'm a social worker. I studied at Monash. I've been practicing in the field for about 3 years. So emotions obviously come up a lot during the work, triggers and whatnot. And I just want to share a little bit about topics and interesting ideas and have some discussions around that. And today we're going to talk about emotions, specifically jealousy, because it's a difficult emotion to express, and it's very misunderstood. So let's just begin by talking about where does jealousy get felt, where is it experienced, and then in a societal sense, where do you think we don't express jealousy, or we really push that emotion down? How is it viewed?
How's it viewed? Yeah, so yeah, jealousy is a really interesting emotion. Yeah, where's it felt? I mean, physically, where has it felt? I mean, people probably feel it all differently. I think, where do I feel jealousy? Like, you mean physically, where do I feel jealousy? Yeah. I guess it's kind of like for me, it kind of triggers mostly around my chest, but I guess people would feel it in different areas. It'd be presenting physically differently for different people. But it's really interesting, the whole concept around jealousy and where it sits in the emotional array. I think what's interesting about emotions is we somehow label emotions as being good or bad, right? We have good emotions and we have bad emotions. Good emotions, we're happy, we feel love. We have bad emotions, we feel jealous or we feel angry. And we categorize these emotions due to some system we've been told about. This emotion is this way on the spectrum or that way on the spectrum. And I guess there's the way I sort of think about this is like, are emotions good or bad, or are emotions just emotions, right? And your emotions, how you feel them, has if you feel them or not is not a good or bad thing. And you kind of don't have control over your emotions either, right? So it's like, if you had control over your emotions, you would just feel happy all the time and you would just feel love all the time, right?
So this is really interesting, because I think for someone who's so into personal development, I've been, into it, you're into it. We just think, and a lot of the rhetoric which is current is, you've got to have total emotional control, total control over your thinking and thoughts. And there's a bit of an unrealistic idea that that's possible and achievable.
Yeah. Oh, I think you don't have any control over your emotions or your thoughts, because your thoughts just happen. That is it. That's what happens. You have a consistent flow of thought, right? That's basically it. That your mind just, it's always thinking. You're not in control of your thoughts. You're not in control of your emotions. You are in control of your actions in relation to your thoughts and your emotions. That is what you're in control of. You can't control that gibberish that comes through your mind, that just comes through your mind. And you can't control your emotions either, that are triggered by an event or by a thought. But you can control what you do with that thought or that emotion, right? And like, yeah, there is some talk about, it's more around, I don't know if it's really in the self-improvement space, but it's mostly in like, you have emotional control, or, control your thoughts. And I'm like, well, I actually think you can't. I think that's pointless exercise. You don't have any control over things that are controllable, but you do have control over your actions.
So you can control how you respond to your thoughts and emotions, and then what you do with that afterwards.
Yeah, that's where your control of human being comes in, right? So like, you have mind goes off and does mind things. You don't have control over mind things; they just happen, right? Over time, you might find mind things will get slower, or you have more space between mind things happening. You're more present, but you don't have control necessarily over those things when they're happening. They're happening. You might be living in the past, you might be living in the future, you might be creating a story, or you might be present. That's awesome when you're present, right? But that doesn't happen all the time. So the only thing I think you really have control over is your response to the things that are happening in your mind. So you have the choice of letting that thought or that emotion control your action, right? Now, what a sign of, I guess, getting mature in the space is that you are aware of your thoughts as being your thoughts and not being you. And you're aware of your emotions as being your emotions and not being you. Like, they are things that are happening, that you're feeling them. But if you start identifying with them, then you start judging them or blaming them. And I think it's good to create a little bit of separation. There are things that are happening, and then what you do with them is your decision.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, either they're repressed. I think, and especially jealousy, for example, I think in society, we're not good at allowing a safe enough space to express certain emotions, especially the ones we deem as bad.
Yeah. Well,
shame, guilt,
yeah.
sadness.
It's like we associate other emotions with the emotion that we're feeling. So going back to, I guess, jealousy, right? So that's painted as a bad emotion that you shouldn't have, particularly in men, experiencing jealousy. That's linked to a couple of things. One, weakness. It's, if you're feeling jealous about another guy, or feeling jealous about a behavior or whatever, that's linked to some type of like, you should be shamed, you're not masculine enough, why feeling threatened, why feeling jealous. It's also linked to the actions that can come out of those emotions, right? So control, right? So there's a really important topic here around emotional response to a response to your emotions, right? So like, someone reacting out using control to, I guess, dampen or reduce the feeling of jealousy, right? So, and that does happen in society, but that's not a problem with the emotion. That's a problem with the response to the emotion, right? If if we take an extreme example, if your response to feeling happy was to execute control or to be violent, happy would be a negative emotion, right? Now, what happens is people's responses to uncomfortable feelings, right? And those uncomfortable feelings being jealousy, anger, are the things that are associated with having the feelings themselves. But what they are is their responses to it. And what I believe is there's actually nothing wrong with feeling those emotions, and you actually need to feel them, and you need to express them verbally, talking about them, not react to them, respond to them. So items like control or violence or anger are normally reactions to an emotion. They're not responses to an emotion. So to be present with your emotion, you need to acknowledge it and you need to respond to it, but be conscious in your response. So yeah, I guess what we normally see is we see reactions to emotions, and therefore those emotions that are deemed as causing the reaction are deemed as bad and then shamed. Emotions that are given that negative, like it's a negative emotion, we don't like to talk about it, where we feel shame around feeling the emotion. And what we actually need to do, instead of feeling shame about having the emotion, is acknowledge the emotion and talk about the emotion, right? And express it in a positive way, like, I'm feeling this feeling, right? It's the repression of feeling your feeling and the shame around feeling feelings that can lead to actions that look like control, or that are control or violence, right? So it is the actual repression of the repression of the expression of these emotions and talking about these emotions, because we've got shame associated with them, that I believe have a pretty strong correlation with the negative actions that relate to them. So yeah, is that resonating? Is that making sense?
Yeah. So you say most people would react to their feelings. Could you maybe provide an example where you're with your partner, you're out, you notice that your partner's looking at someone, you maybe feel that someone's coming up and talking and showing a lot of interest, and you notice a feeling of jealousy coming up?
Yeah.
How can you not react to that feeling in an aggressive way and in a controlling way, versus how would you respond to that feeling? Because you have to recognize that's happening inside you, and then to be able to communicate that.
Yeah, sure. I'll talk about an experience that I've had with a partner where I've felt jealousy, and I responded to it instead of reacting to it. So the situation was basically she was getting a lot of attention from a particular ex on a social media platform, right? And that was pretty obvious to me, like, liking and commenting and all that kind of stuff. And it was making me feel pretty uncomfortable, right? I was feeling jealous. That's what I was feeling. And I was like, whew, this is, feeling jealous doesn't feel cool, right? None of us want to feel it. Now, I could have gone down the spiral of like shaming myself for feeling jealous, or like being, oh, you're such an idiot, why are you so insecure, blah, blah, blah. And that's a lot of what guys do. We're like, and sometimes
like a complete dismissal. Oh no, just shut that down. I don't need to acknowledge what I'm feeling, whatever. Like, just be chill, be like super cool guy, like,
super
whatever.
cool guy, it's fine. Yeah. Right. And like, why am I not, man enough to just be like alpha in the situation, right? And like we get told, one of the messaging that we get is like, if you're jealous, you're weak, or you're insecure, or whatever. But everyone feels jealousy. Everyone feels this emotion. And that's no reflection of who they are. It's just the fact that the emotion exists. So I went through some reflection of like, why am I feeling this? What's going on? And I thought, instead of trying to like deal with this myself and carry it, like maybe I should express it, but and respond to it. So I raised it as a topic with my partner. I was like, hey, this is a little bit vulnerable for me, because it is vulnerable when you're expressing it. And so I said, hey, this is a little bit vulnerable for me. I've noticed this behavior from this particular person on your social media, and it's making me feel uncomfortable. I'm feeling jealous about this particular interaction that's happening, and I don't really know what to do with this emotion. Like, in all honesty, I didn't know what to do. I was like, hey, I'm feeling this emotion. It's uncomfortable. I don't know what to do, but I want to share with you that I was experiencing it in this particular situation. Right? I just presented it, right, and had a really open conversation about how I was feeling. Now, what I didn't do was go in and say, try to control it. You know, there was definitely tempted to be like, I don't want to feel this feeling anymore, so I want to control this situation from occurring, right? You know, like, why are you still friends with that person on Instagram, or why are you still chatting to that person, or blah 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 blah. And that's a control-based response, right? What I did was just present my emotions about the situation and how I was feeling about it, and talk about what the possible actions could be as a couple to resolve it or not resolve it. Like, you know, it's about having an open conversation. Now, the way the conversation went, like, and I was really happy for the conversation to go in either direction, right? And the way the conversation went was, actually, she said, yeah, I've noticed that too, and it's making me feel uncomfortable. And the other day, I actually had a conversation with that guy, and yeah, I'm going to block them, because it's made me feel really uncomfortable as well, right? And so it was a really powerful conversation to have, where we were both really vulnerable in the situation. Now, it could have gone the other way, and it could have been, hey, actually, there's nothing really going on there. I'm friends with that person, so I understand that you're feeling jealous or you're feeling that thing, but I want you to be, you know, this is the way a model conversation could have happened. But I want you to feel secure in our relationship. So just, you don't have to worry about that. It's all cool, right? It could have just gone like that, and I would have just had to accept that outcome, right? Because I brought it up, and I have to be. You can't control other people. You can't control those types of things, but you're expressing it, right?
So for example, I love this example. So, because everything kind of worked out, you know, in essence, it brought you closer together. She could share her feelings, and
yeah.
But say, you know, it did go the other way. What then? Because then what are you left with after that? After sharing the feeling, and then because then it would probably be easy to be more reactive, and judging and shaming yourself, because I guess you're feeling vulnerable, you're in that state, you know.
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on your relationship, the quality of your relationship, and talking about emotions, right? In this particular situation, like, I was really comfortable with expressing my emotion, right? I've had other situations in the past where it hasn't gone like that, right? Where I expressed a particular emotion, but it was also jealousy. This is with another partner, and that person shamed me for feeling that feeling and said, you shouldn't feel that feeling, blah, 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 right? And I sort of said, oh, okay. I'm like, I thought we kind of had this agreement where I could just discuss what was going on with you, and obviously that's triggered you in some way, right? And it led to a different type of conversation, right? And it can, like, I mean, it's a really vulnerable thing, right? When you're sharing how you're feeling with the person you love, when it's particularly in an emotional way that as men we've been told that we're not allowed to have, or shouldn't have, right? So it can be tricky, right? But you never know what's on the other side of that conversation unless you have the conversation. So you're never going to have the possibility of becoming closer together or resolving a thing that is getting in your way, or you're creating a story about, unless you put more truth into it through having a conversation. So I just encourage people to have the conversation. You never know what's going to happen, right? Yeah.
I mean, it's staying authentic to yourself, and it's honoring your own feelings and emotions, and that's part of becoming closer to yourself, regardless of how it turns out, how your partner goes with it.
Yeah, that's true. I think it's really important to make the distinction about bringing up a topic and being responsible for your feelings, and not blaming the other person for the way you're feeling.
Okay.
Right.
There's a fine line. It sounds.
Yeah, it's a fine line. There's a fine line. I am responsible for my existence. My existence is my responsibility. Everything, my perception, my whole reality is my responsibility, right? How I feel, all those things, that's my responsibility. That's mine. That's not theirs. That's mine. So in expressing how I am feeling, it's not you are making me feel jealous. It is not you are making me angry. It's not blaming, right? You need to take responsibility for your emotions. It's like, this situation happened and I felt like this. Right? And it's really important, that language, right? Because it's like you got to be clear that events happen and then you have emotions, right?
Yeah.
Right. And it's not about blaming other people, right? Now, there can be problematic behaviors that, you could be in a problematic relationship where there's a repeated behavior that is bringing out that emotion, or bringing out the types of emotions, and that's not creating a positive environment for you, right? Right. It could be jealousy. It could be it could be a whole bunch of other things, right? The individual could be saying things that is making you feel bad, and you are still in control of your reality, right? So you can still be like, okay, well, I've addressed this. I'm not really happy with the way the conversation's going or the behavior. I can't seem to find a solution that we both agree on. And then you need to make the decision about your persistence in that environment or not.
Right. That makes sense. You got to reassess, and after a long time of expressing your emotions, and if you're still feeling these certain things are coming up over and over and over, and you're not satisfied with it, then obviously change needs to occur, and that's needs to be reassessed. So I do want to talk about something, because we were driving to surfing, and there was something you said that really stood out to me, and it was, in the English language, we have quite a limited vocabulary to discuss our feelings, right? And something that we tend to do a lot is we say, I am an emotion, so I am depressed, right? So the emotion kind of
it's
us.
really interesting. Yeah.
And in Spanish, because I know that you
have it.
You have it. Do you want to talk on that differentiation, and also how that changes how you can express it, and maybe just changes, it's the context of how we even look at our emotions, because language is very important.
Language creates the reality. Like, is the way you think, and the way you think is the construct in which reality presents itself to you. And I just found it interesting whilst learning Spanish, is that you have certain things, you are not certain things. Like, and like it's a difference between, and they have permanence versus impermanence, right? So we kind of don't have a distinction, right? So like they've got soy and estoy, right? So they've got I am this, like I am Dan, versus
Okay.
I right now I am this, right? Or I have this
Ah,
versus I am this, right? And it's
okay.
someone who's watching this has a better grasp of Spanish will maybe be able to explain it a little bit better. Mine's pretty basic, but one of my previous relationships was just in Spanish, and what I noticed was the different expression of emotion around I I'm having this emotion versus I am this emotion, right? And in English, we're like, I am angry,
Mm.
which sounds a lot more like you are that thing.
Right. I am. It's like I am anger. You're
I
saying
am anger.
I am anger. It's like, wow, that's pretty full on that you're identifying so
Yeah.
much with anger.
But we also go, I am hungry. Like it's
Right. Not I am experiencing hunger
yeah.
right now.
Yeah, like
Temporarily.
yeah,
Right.
tengo hambre in Spanish is like I have hunger.
Right.
That's something that you have, and it's
Interesting.
yeah, it is not permanent. It's like something that you have right now.
Oh,
Yeah, and it's like
so
it's
interesting.
interesting because we don't really have that in English, and I wonder what happens in the difference between expression and identification with emotion versus are we in the English language? And it's just a conversation, like a thought thing. It's like, do we over identify with our emotions because of our language structure? Like, is there a difference in cultures around the way they express their emotion and the impermanence of it? Like, there's some stereotypes with like Latin-based cultures. They're very expressive, right? And they can scream, yell, shout, cry, and that's cool. And everyone just gets on with business, right? And it's very interesting in the relationships I've had in that, because highly emotional relationships, which in like Australian cultures or English cultures, we see that as bad, right? Because we kind of attach our identity to our emotion. But maybe there's something in the language where it's cool to express your emotion, because expressing your emotion isn't you being the emotion, it's just you expressing what you've got. And then that's it, right? It's like, I'm curious about it. I mean, there's probably smarter people out there that would be able to describe it, but in my experience with it, I'm like, I wonder if it is the root of the identification of language as being as emotion as being self in our language structure. Like, I am angry, I am sad, versus I'm having this right now, or this is what I am right now, right? Like, and which is the more sort of Spanish, my understanding of the Spanish way of expressing yourself. So yeah, I'm just curious about that. I think it's an interesting, I guess, thought.
Do you see, because you've lived in those countries where there's Spanish speaking, have you seen also the males are more expressive as well as females, or like it's just accepted?
Everyone's more expressive in terms of their emotions, right? They're more expressive about all their emotions, right? They're like they're more warm, and they can also be more furious, and they could be they could be all the emotions at once, right? And that's regardless of male, female, or any type of gender identification, right? It's like it's just something that at least I've experienced in their culture. Yeah, and it's kind of cool, right? It's like, I feel like sometimes we're a bit scared to express it. Be careful, like, between expressing and reacting. Like, there's also a lot of reactivity in those cultures as well, right? So like, but I'm curious about whether it's okay, it's more okay to express yourself because it's not expressing you is expressing an emotion in those cultures. Yeah.
I've found that the culture of, letting loose on the weekend is maybe a time where people can feel a bit more free to express their emotions. But only then it's regulated to a Saturday night for 3 to 4 hours, and then it's back to just you got to be go through the working week and whatnot, and dial it down again. So it's kind of like maybe we've engineered times where that is more acceptable, and then there's times where it's not.
Well, yeah, I think we get pretty deep into societal constructs and what values we have in society when we start talking about this. Like, in Australia, in Australian culture, work and success comes above family and relationships and life, right? Whereas my experience of Latin-based cultures is it's the opposite, right? It's life, family, connections, and then work, right? So I think there's something deeper in that expression of life and connection in those cultures compared to our cultures.
Interesting. That's probably a whole nother podcast.
That's another topic for another day. Yeah.
That's another topic.
I do like, I guess doing what I do is I do work across cultures, right? And I think it's pretty interesting how different societies have different values, and those different values play out in a lot of different ways with the way that we communicate, the way we work, the way we express ourselves. And I think that's another conversation for another day. But we're working with international teams with different co-location and hybrid location kind of setups. Teams in India, teams in the Philippines, teams in Europe versus teams in Australia. You get a lot of different perspectives of value. Yeah. Anyway, something completely aside note.
Yeah, I'd love to go deep into that. Maybe we could do another podcast.
Okay, cool.
Awesome. Well, I think there's some real deep nuggets of wisdom there that you've shared. Thanks for coming on Unconditionally Human. And any last words?
Oh man, just thanks for having me. And just be more human.
Be more human.
Just be more human.
That's it. I love that. Yeah, share humanity. Cool.
All right.
All right, guys. Thanks so much for tuning in.
See ya. Bye. Thanks.